evening, ladies and gentlemen. The November 12th, 2013 joint meeting between the Temple City Parks and Recreation Commission and the Temple City Planning Commission will come to order. Can we have a roll call of the Planning Commissioners, please?
Commissioner Curran?
Here.
Commissioner Horton?
Here.
Commissioner Leary?
Here.
Vice Chairman Leon?
Here.
Chairman Cordes?
Here.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Parks and Recreation Commission, and may we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Fish? Here. Commissioner Lopez?
Here.
Commissioner Rosso? Here. Vice Chairman Haddad? Here. Chairman Georgina?
Here. Now, would everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is public comments, and this is the time that we set aside for anyone that wishes to speak on an item that is not covered on the agenda this evening. It is not on the agenda. Do we have anyone that wants to speak?
Motion to close public comments.
We have one. Jerry Jambazian?
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. Something kind of unique happened today at lunch in our Kiwanis Club, and I just want to make you aware of it. And just indulge me for about 2 minutes. I'm in charge of our Students of the Month at Temple City, for Temple City Unified School District. And each week we recognize outstanding students at our school. And we had 3 students today from Emperor School. One of them was kind of unique. His name was Andrew. And let me just tell you a little bit about Andrew. His hobbies are drawing, building, painting models, football, baseball, scouting, and music. Best thing that ever happened to Andrew was when he won 3rd place in a Coastal America Ocean Art Contest and met President George Bush, Sylvia Earle, and Jim Toomey in Washington, D.C. The thing that really struck me about this young man is that I asked him if he could build one thing in the world, what would it be? And this was his response. I would build an eco-friendly park for Temple City that contained an aquarium, a nature center, and a pond. So I thought that that was kind of unique, and I told him that I would share that with the commission tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on a subject that's not included in the agenda this evening? Now can we have that motion, Commissioner?
Motion to close public comments.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any, no objections? Close the public comments. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. And I believe we have a few remarks from Director Gross.
I will make this brief because I want to give you plenty of time to hear from our consultants. This is a way of background. For many years, the City Council and the Parks and Recreation Commission have expressed concerns with the lack of park and open space in the city. With less than 19 acres of park space for our 38,000 residents, Temple City is far below any national or state standards, which are normally anywhere between 5 and 10 acres per thousand. We have about half an acre. To address this concern in a comprehensive manner, the City Council approved a consultant services agreement in December with RHA Landscape Architects Planners, Inc. to develop a Parks and Open Space Master Plan. The purpose of the master plan was to determine current needs, strengths, and gaps in parks and recreation facilities and programs. Desired outcomes of the study include identification of park and open space needs based on these current gaps and future trends, development of priorities for land acquisition and capital improvement projects based on the community's values, and the development of measurable strategies to achieve goals and recommendations. RHA began the master plan process in January with a kickoff meeting involving staff and an advisory committee, which was comprised of council members, Parks and Recreation commissioners, and community representatives, including those from the Chamber of Commerce, the Temple City Unified School District, and the Sheriff's Department. Over the next several months, public input was solicited through focus group meetings, caught in the act surveys, community meetings, and a statistically valid survey. Once the public input process was completed and the survey results compiled, RHA developed a draft Parks and Open Space Master Plan, which was presented to the advisory committee and the public at a special meeting on October 21st. Tonight, the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Planning Commissions are asked to review the final draft, somewhat final draft, Parks and Open Space Master Plan information that the consultants will provide, and provide input and recommendations as deemed appropriate. As a reminder, this is mainly for our planning commissioners, the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, once adopted by the City Council, will not only be a guiding document for the Parks and Recreation Department for future park and open space development, but it will also be folded into and become part of the open space element of the new general plan process that will begin shortly. With that, I'd like to introduce Doug Grove from RHA, Landscape Planners Architects, Inc., and Nilay Bhatt from Pros Consulting.
Well, Commissioners, it's great to be here tonight, and I love your new council chambers. It's really, really nice. Very nice upgrade. I'm going to let Nilay get started here in just a second, but what we gave you tonight is truly a draft version of the master plan. There's not every piece of the document is there because it would be a little overwhelming. But what you do have is the executive summary that you were given in the staff report, a little bit more detail on that, as well as a lot of data on the sites we're going to be showing you that we've identified as possible open space. So we'll be walking you through that as we go, and I'm going to let Nilay get started here with the overview of the programs.
Thanks, Doug. Good evening, everybody. The next part of the process that I'm talking about will probably take a couple hours, so you can kick back and relax. Just kidding. But when I interviewed with Kathy, as well as a part of the RHA Pros team, this is really what I had mentioned at the time, is our offices are based in Indianapolis. And I said, someone's got to take one for the team, so every time it's winter in Indy, I take all the California and Florida projects. It snowed in Indy, and here I am soaking in the sun, so this project is well worth it already. But having said that, this, as Kathy mentioned, it's been about a 9 or 10 month plan up to this point. As we said all along, this is really a community values model. We didn't know the answers before we started. It was really the community values, the community input, throughout all the processes that Kathy mentioned, that has brought us to these outcomes and the recommendations you will see today. So going on, we'll talk briefly about the outcomes we had in mind before we started, the process that we went along, highlights of the key findings, then the analysis that we've come across both from a programming standpoint and a facility and land standpoint, and then lastly, recommendations as well. Currently, we don't have timelines ascribed to the recommendations, primarily because we want to ensure you're blessing and buying into all the recommendations before we ascribe timelines to it. If you do not, and the strategies are something you say, well, I'm not so sure about this, or, you know, Nilay, whatever the hell you were smoking, I'd love to have some of it. So if those recommendations change, then clearly some other strategies and tactics will move up as well. So between now and the final plan, you will certainly see that, and you will also see the dollars and cents attached to all the recommendations. At this point, the goal is really to ensure that you are aware of the process we've taken, the outcomes, and the high-level recommendations as a whole, without the absolute specifics of each and every single tactic that we have there. So, before I start, any other questions, anything on the process or anything else? Okay. So real quick, as we said, in brief, the 4 or 5 key goals were to identify park and open space needs, from a CIP and land acquisition standpoint, help you develop priorities. This is a master plan, but it's really a guiding document. It's not set in stone. As things change, the plan will change and evolve. to really provide you a guide for a balanced system, and then to allow you and the council to be able to measure success and define what it looks like, so having measurable strategies. And then the bottom line is having an environmentally and a financially sustainable approach. So whatever we do recommend is something that Temple City can do, will be able to do, and ensure it sustains it without putting you in too deep a hole. In a nutshell, this was the process. Pretty much started off saying, where are we today? And that was all the as-is assessment. Using the community outreach, the public participation, demographics, and future trends, we then established the vision for the future to say, where would we want to be tomorrow? And then lastly, what we're going to talk about today as well is then help you identify how do we get there in a reasonable, realistic, and implementable way. So quick summary of the community input. We did everything from focus groups to open public meetings to online survey to on-site surveys, and not just in English, but also in Mandarin. We had a member of our team who's fairly fluent as well, a Mandarin speaker. We actually visited multiple Tai Chi groups at Live Oak Park 8 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't think I'd see so many people, but we probably saw over 200 people there, all with multiple groups and different assortment of music, which was frankly amazing. So got a lot of good input, and the summary of all of that put together is what you will see right now. This is all subjective. It is merely the opinions. So you might see some people say something as a strength, and then the very same thing might be listed as somebody else as an opportunity. So the strengths, really the special events, were among the biggest things. We heard that over and over again. People loved it, they enjoyed it very much, certainly want them to continue. The cleanliness, the maintenance of the facilities, of the parks, was said several times as well. The diversity of the program types, our STARS program, and then just the volunteerism and the fact that people step up and care so much about the system were things that were mentioned as significant strengths based on the community respondents. The areas of opportunity mentioned the need and a want for a community aquatic center. Kathy alluded to the lack of park acreage based on your population numbers, so just additional open green space. If and where possible, additional partnerships as well, especially with the Unified School District, looking at the wash and perhaps evaluating how that could be used for open space as well. And a pet-friendly park or a space as well, where many respondents indicate they actually went to Rosemead Park to walk the dog and mentioned they might enjoy having a space within Temple City itself, if not dedicated, at least something that might be open to pets as well. Program assessments, we looked at all the different core programs that Kathy and her team offer. These are some of the ones we looked at: the after school, seniors, volunteers, youth sports, special events, concert in the park, lights in Temple City, and then specific fees and charge classes. This is based on a template that we pros have created that looks at everything from program benefits, the way you sell and promote the program, to the 8 segments you target, the volunteers as well as partners that you have in those cases, the program life cycles, feedback, promotions, as well as financial performance metrics. And combining all of that, you get to see some of these results. As a whole, there is an excellent diversity in types of offerings. You've heard this before as well, but special events are a great strength. What we've created is a chart which essentially tracks life cycles, or where a program is within a life cycle based on participation numbers. So they go in 6 stages, going from introduction stage when you offer a brand new program, moving on to taking off, growth, mature, saturated, and decline. And effectively you can chart the entire system's programs based on those life cycles to say, as a whole, how many programs are brand new, which means we're focusing on innovation, versus how many are growing and taking off, doing really well and ought to continue, versus on the other end of the spectrum, how many are reducing in number or declining as well, and we perhaps need to take a second look at those. So we had about 5% programs only that were classically introduction of brand new programs, which from a standard standpoint is actually fairly low. we'd recommend those to be at least about 10%. So effectively 1 in 10 programs ought to be something that you keep reinventing. On the other end of the spectrum, the bottom 10% need to be going through a process of what we call creative destruction. You essentially need to eliminate the worst performing ones so you can bring in new ones as well and keep the pipeline refreshed. Over 60% of the programs had either very slow or stagnant growth or no growth at all, which is mature, saturated, and declining. Those are the ones you want to look very strongly at. Part of the reason is we don't have space in certain cases, so we're maxed out, which means we can't grow. In some other cases, as you'll see later on as well, we asked people why they did participate, and one of the top 3 reasons was, I don't know what's being offered. And that goes back more to marketing and outreach, especially in a multilingual, multi-ethnic, diverse community as yours. The medium of communication takes even more importance than in most other places. Now, merely English might not be adequate enough, merely Spanish and or Chinese or Mandarin or Cantonese as well might be important too. So just outreach is an area that certainly needs to be looked at for repositioning program life cycles. And the second key part was the 8 segments. This is an aging community. You have a large portion of 55 plus, which I call active adults. They don't behave like seniors, but you have a growing number of 55 plus population. However, the number of programs offered to those in that age group is imbalanced compared to the number of people in the population within that age group. So as a whole, you have more than 50% of the population that's over the age of 45 in Temple City. But of all the programs that are offered, only 24%, less than 1 in 4 programs, actually target the age group. So you have a large number of programs that are targeting a very small percentage of the audience itself, whereas on the other end of the population, you have a number of people that, in my opinion, might be underserved. And so that's something that the staff will continue looking at and tracking through this as well. And they are doing a lot of different program promotions. We even publicize all these meetings in 2 languages, which I thought was great. But these are some of the key findings from the program assessment data and the matrix that we reviewed with the staff. Using all of this, we've created a model that looks at survey data, which is a statistically valid survey, as well as all the information that we have assessed on a subjective standpoint, the park assessment, program assessment, demographics, trends, and all the rest. What the model does is it ascribes or allocates 30% of the weight to unmet needs. In the survey, people were asked, do you have a need for something? If yes, to what extent is your need being met? 100%, 75, 50, 25, or 0. Also, they were asked for the same facility, amenities, or programs. Is this important to you and members of your household? If yes, rank the top 4 most important facilities or programs for your standpoint. What it really helps you do is it looks at something truly from a triangulating fashion. For me, water probably is the most important thing. Right now, it's not an unmet need. You don't need to keep giving me more and more of it. On the other hand, I think cricket is a very large unmet need in Temple City, but for 8 people. So it's not really important for the community. So the point becomes, what's most important for the community, and from that, what's an unmet need? That truly is a priority. Then we also look at financial and economic realities and all the rest, which is where the remaining 40% of the allocation comes in. So the combination of 30% unmet need, 30% importance, and 40% our evaluation comes up to 100%, based on which we've created the priority rankings. So just because something is lower in the priority doesn't mean it's not important. It just means you're doing a better job meeting the needs of that area versus the others. So with that, these are the program or the facility and amenity priority rankings, and these are the program priority rankings for Temple City. A number of them are, again, very health and wellness related. Walking and biking, bike lanes, the pool, Wi-Fi access in the parks. I thought that was really cool and in keeping with the times, where right now I doubt there's anybody sitting here on the dais that doesn't have a smartphone or doesn't know somebody who uses a smartphone all the time. That's just the way we interact with technology. And so as you look at the younger or a growing population, that's a huge part of it. On the other end, we typically look at programs driving facility design, and that's where the program priority rankings, both the lap swim, the cultural and special events, as well as senior health and fitness programs and aqua aerobics become high priority programs as well. So these are some of the key priorities. I'm going to let Doug talk about the parks and facilities and show you what exists, and then we'll come back and look at the recommendations as well.
The two charts that Neela just had there are actually in your executive summary on pages 13 and 14 if you want to look at those at your leisure. What we've basically gone through so far is the executive summary kind of in a slide form. What we're going to do now is get into the existing park facilities and the proposed park facilities. So if you go to page 15, which is the last numbered page in your book, and flip that page over, we'll get into the existing parks and facilities as well as their recommendations and what we found out there that we can use for open space. The first map you see is the city boundary, obviously in yellow, and we looked at all the parks and the schools within the city. Obviously we have 2 parks, and then we have a number, I think 7 schools total. We also looked at, in a kind of cursory fashion, parks with outside the city boundaries. Because in some of our discussions with some of the community, we found out they were using Rosemead Park, thinking it was maybe part of Temple City, because it's right across the street from Temple City, or some of, so we started thinking, well, are they using other parks in that facility, outside the city limits as well, thinking that they might be in the city boundary. Because unless you really know where the boundary is, you can drive right by it and not know, and think that you were still in the city. So we charted those parks, and we have aerial documentation of what's in those parks. If you click to the next page, you'll see the draft version still kind of being finalized, but it's the chart that shows everything that's in the 2 Temple City parks, Idaho Park and Temple City, as well as the amenities that are in the schools. And then you'll see down at the bottom on the left side are the parks that are outside the city limits. In the online survey that we did, we asked how many of those parks had people visited in the last year. So you can see, you know, on some of those, the city, or the people actually have visited those parks, so are using those facilities. Obviously, you can't program those because they're not within your city boundaries, but you can possibly work with other cities and look at maybe some joint use. So you'll see there, you'll see summary totals, everything is within the existing schools that are on site. We also looked at 4 private schools, and I'll show you those in a second as we get into the mapping of that. So that chart you can go back to and refer to as we're going through if you want to know what's in each facility. If you click to the next page, we have documented everything, and I mean everything, including trash cans, benches, drinking fountains. They're in the 2 parks that you have right now. Those are reflected in that matrix you just saw, as well as on the right side of these graphics. You'll see they're noted as well, color code on the map. So that way you have a good itinerary, or good documentation of what's actually there when you get ready to start looking at what we want to do as far as recommendations. The other park we obviously had, in the book I've got the floor plans of the 2 buildings, but I don't have those in the slides. This is Temple City Park, obviously, and we've documented that as well. So the 2 parks in the city, we've documented very detailed on what's there, and so you've got those as a reference. As you go on behind, the next step is our potential open space. So we looked at what you had already, school-wise, open space, and your 2 parks. And now we're going to look at spaces that we found that we look at as potential open space. And what we've done with this part of the plan, I'm going to go to my computer here in a second, is we put all this in Google Earth. So that what that allows you to do is be very flexible. A plan like this, you know, we find sites right now that are available that maybe you want to use, those might be not available in a year. So to have a static plan that still shows that as a site that you want to use doesn't really make a lot of sense. So the Google Earth allows anybody in the staff to update that on a regular basis in a very easy fashion. I'll show you here in a second as we go through that. And at that point I'm going to go over to the computer here. And you'll see the map up there of the entire city. Everything that's not in blue is within the city limits. So you can really get a clear idea of what the city boundaries are. First thing I'm going to go through is two things we looked at. One of the things that came up, as you saw in that needs analysis, was trails, hiking trails, biking trails. So one of the things we've looked at trail-wise is you have two washes in town, the Eaton Wash that runs along the eastern, or the western boundary, and the Acadia Wash, which runs over on the eastern side. So we've looked at each one of those sites and if you follow along, the rest of your book will have actual graphics showing you what those trails look like and what those sites look like in a printed graphic form. And I'll walk you through here on this. So we've got the first section of trail we're talking about doing would be from along Longman Avenue down to Las Tunas. The wash is very easy to build trails in. In fact, I think Kathy has already talked a little bit to the county, and they're very excited about the opportunity of possibly doing that if that's a recommendation that comes forward from Planning Commission and Council. It's relatively inexpensive improvements. I mean, there's cost involved, but it's very simple to do, and it's done everywhere. That we've done several trails in there, and it's a very easy way to get a lot of open space and address one of the needs that you really have, which is hiking and biking trails. The second portion goes behind the Kmart over here, along by the sheriff station. Goes down basically from Las Tunas down to Rosemead Boulevard. As we zoom along here, we've got the next section that would go from Rosemead all the way down to Encinita, and then continues on down all the way to Lower Azusa, and then travels along to the industrial area to the city boundary. One thing that's kind of neat about this trail system is if you zoom back out a little bit here, you can see, don't look at the screen, you might get dizzy. The Rio Hondo bike path is over here on the right side. It travels all the way down to the beach. And so this wash actually comes in here and dumps into that. So working with El Monte to the south and then with the county, some of the county areas, getting a connection from there to the Rio Hondo bike path would be a great way to connect the city and give people a chance to bike or hike out of there and get down to other places south, towards the beach and so forth. The other part of the trail we talked about was the Arcadia Wash, which is on the east side of town. And that would come, and you'd work with Arcadia to the north if they wanted to develop a trail here, but the trail would come along Arcadia Wash. And again, it's a very close connection right here to the Rio Hondo bike path. You're closer than the Eaton Wash is. But again, providing a way for residents to access open space and to get into a bigger open space and travel down to the south. We looked at all the school sites, so we'll start out with Temple City High School. And what I've done is, this is the existing site that you see here, and what we've highlighted is all of the open space, not the buildings. Obviously those can't be used. And we're recommending, and we've already met with district staff as well. We had a joint meeting with them early on, and they're very open to looking at joint use agreements and seeing how this stuff can be worked together. And what they just finished at the end of last year was their facilities master plan. So they actually inserted what they're proposing to do, and you've got that in your book as well, for their improvements. And there's also a chart that shows what elements they're actually proposing to improve over the next, and we don't really have a timeline from them yet. That'd be the next step, is to actually find out what their timeline is. But you can see even just at Temple City High School, they're doing new hard courts, they're doing repairing the play fields, new tennis courts, full realignment of the baseball field, but then they're upfitting a new stadium and a track, as well as a new practice gymnasium, new performing arts theater, which that did come up with some of the needs studies, new field house, and a new pool. So with all the improvements they're planning there, obviously one of the recommendations we're going to be making is to really sit down with them and decide what are some things that the city can maybe co-op with on this, and to be able to use these facilities after school hours that are going to be developed. The next school site here is Oak Avenue Intermediate School, which is right to the east or to the west, and we've got their plan in there. So they're obviously on the intermediate school, they're going to be redoing the play fields a little bit and redoing the hard courts. So they're adding some more tennis courts and so forth. So there is going to be some opportunity to utilize those facilities as well for open space in the city. Longden Elementary School, down to the south, they already have the ball field as well. Their improvements they're planning on doing there is to, you can see in the existing site, they've got hard courts here. They're looking at putting in a soccer field here. The existing ball fields would stay the way they are. Doing more hard court, redoing the hard court. So again, they're developing a soccer field level, play field that could be utilized, obviously, by both the school and by the city. Cloverley Elementary School, further to the south. Their plan they're looking at doing is basically just redoing the hard courts. The smaller elementary schools are not doing a lot of improvements. They're mostly doing the hard courts, fixing some of the playground pads, and nothing substantial. But they do already have, as you can see in the aerial here, a lot of green space that could be utilized by the city as well. La Rosa, right down here again, further to the south. The plan that they're doing, they're actually going to improve the play fields, redo the hard courts, and new playground, redo the playgrounds, so forth. So you've got some other smaller improvements, but some other areas where the city can utilize that. Clementon Schools, obviously in El Monte School District, over on the east side of the city. Though we could not find any plan improvements that they're doing there. They've got a nice green space and a few hard courts, so a smaller space. But over on the east side, if we can work with the El Monte School District on that, to be able to utilize that facility in the off school hours, that would be a great way to get something on the east side. Emperor School, which Jerry just talked about, over actually in county incorporated area, not within the city boundary, but still a school that the STARS program runs out of, so the city's already utilizing that site, for the city property. Here they're redoing the soccer, baseball field, they're putting in a new playground and redoing the hard court. So the elementary schools are pretty much the same on all of them as far as what they're doing. We looked at four sites, schools and church sites, that we thought had some open space possibilities. One was the Pacific Friends School. It's a very small area, as you can see. It's only about half an acre, but it is an open space that if we can, again, it's a private school. But if it's something that they're not using at certain times in the day, it could be a nice gathering space for city functions. St. Luke's Elementary School, again, they've got a nice large open space area, a lot of hard court space, access right off of Live Oak Avenue, so some possibilities there as well. Golden West Baptist Church is a small little spot, and it's only about a little less than half an acre, but there is some opportunity. It's just an open turf area, really. They have some boats and things, so maybe this could be utilized for something to use when they're not using that space. And the last one, the school-wise, was St. Lutheran Church and School. They actually have a little over an acre of green space, hard courts, and a nice playground. So there's great opportunities there to be working with them as well. I'm going to go through some of the things now we broke down the rest of the sites now are not school related, not even necessarily city owned. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But we have possible sites which we're going to call the pie in the sky sites. Sites that would be great if you could utilize them. There's no plan that we know at this time to sell them or to utilize them. We wanted to bring them up and show you so you can at least be aware of them. The first one you'll all be very familiar with is the old Alpha Beta site over on Temple City Boulevard. We've talked with the planning guys, with Brian and so forth, and that is being planned right now as a mixed-use facility development. So we wanted to identify it so that it was shown on the plan. That's one of those things that later on could be removed easily if the mixed use does go through. You don't have to leave it in the plan, but we wanted to at least call it out as a possible spot. The other one here, the next one is the sheriff station. Obviously, there's no immediate plans to do anything with the sheriff station, but there has been discussion about a new civic center. So if there is a possibility to, that they were going to put the sheriff station in a new location, this actually makes a great location for a park, primarily too because it's right next to the trail. So if the trail was developed and you put the parking here, and this space is really pretty cumbersome, I'm sure, for the sheriff to negotiate with the size of it and the shape it is. But it'd be a great space for a park. And you could maybe utilize the existing buildings renovated for community centers and so forth. So again, it's something there's no discussion now that's going to happen, but we wanted to bring it up as a real possible chance that, if something down the road happens with the Civic Center, at least you have in the plan that this is something we discussed. The next one is a small little site down in the south end of town, then right next to the industrial area. This is an industrial area here, this is their yard, but this little section in the front is obviously owned by them, but it's really not utilized at all. The other advantage here is it's close to the trail, so if you put the trail in, you got an easement through their property, you could utilize this as a trailhead, so to speak, to get into the trail, and a small space. I think the site is about a quarter an acre, so really not big enough for a big park, but it would be a nice trailhead space, and maybe a picnic table and a shelter that could go in there as well. But there really is nothing down the south side at all, with the city right as it is. This one over on Gracewood is obviously right across from Live Oak Park. Again, no discussion, no plans to purchase that property or sell it, but we wanted to bring it up as if there was ever a desire by this owner to sell that center, it would be a great expansion of Live Oak Park. So we wanted to put it on the map as a possibility, but again, that would be a down the road decision as those things come available. The last of these, kind of what we call pie in the sky sites, is the post office. Through these discussions, we've heard that there's a possibility that it might be closed by the federal government. If it is, it's a great location next to downtown. It's pretty close to Las Tunas. It's great in the residential area. So if it was, you could either use it for a community center or raise the building and put in whatever you'd like. So again, those 5 sites are what we look at as possible sites. They could come true, they might not come true, but we wanted to include those in the plan. The next 10 sites here, we'll go through pretty quickly, are we call potential open space. These are sites that either the city does own or could purchase or could get available, and I'll show you how, and it actually have a little more realistic possibility of being used. The first one is the city maintenance yard that is down here. Again, obviously we have to relook at the city maintenance yard, you can't get rid of it, but again, it's right next to the trail. You have the trail you can watch, you've got a great park facility right here. So obviously part of step 1 of this is to actually find a place to move the city maintenance yard, and we've got some thoughts on that as well, but it's a great location. It's kind of a weird shape for a maintenance yard, but it'd be a great shape for a park. The next one over here is over on the corner of Live Oak and McCullough Avenue. It's actually, right now is, I think it was Ward Tree Service is actually utilizing that. We're not sure the ownership of that yet. We're still trying to figure that out. But it is there's beautiful trees there. I mean, oak trees, palm trees. And it's about, I think it's about a half an acre. So it would be a great small park right off of Live Oak Avenue. So obviously negotiations or discussions with the owner of that property would be needed for that. But it would be a very easy park to do, and you'd have great shade and trees there when you did it. The next couple here are actually water district properties, and we'll go through each one. One of them over in the very far corner of the city at Longden and that street. And it's about half an acre, so obviously they have their well site on there, but we've done other sites, other cities where we've actually developed parks within there. You have to fence off the well site and give them maintenance access, but for some of the needs, they come up with the needs study as far as picnic shelters and walking trails. This would be a great, again, it's right next to the trail, so it could become a trailhead possibly as well. Another water district property site is over on Olive Street. It's right, I'll back up here a little bit. This is Temple City, or Baldwin Avenue. So it's a couple of spaces in. You see the pump sites right here. But there's, again, just open space around that. So another possibility, I think it's about, again, a half acre. So another site where you could utilize something within the middle of the city. These next sites are actually back around Las Tunas. They're existing parking lots. The first one here is already owned by the city. This one here, this property here is actually purchased by the city. And then this last one, from our discussions with city staff, is in the process of being negotiated to be purchased. So there's a possibility here. You've got existing residential housing here, existing city parking lot here. The possibility of maybe having this be something that works with this mixed-use property that's going on the Alpha Beta site. This next one's actually kind of an exciting one. Talking with staff and looking at possibilities. You have the SCE, which is about 16.5 acres over on the east side of town. Actually, it's an unincorporated area of the county. So there's a lot of, we've done several parks in SCEs, and there are restrictions on height and things, but you can do a lot of great open space things. And I've kind of put in here, just to give you a reference, this up here is a Little League field, 200 feet, which you don't really see at Live Oak Park. This is a 300-foot ball field, so obviously that wouldn't fit. This is a full-size soccer field. So you could get, you couldn't do full-size sports lighting, but you could do, you know, the equivalent of that kind of open space that people could use for either, you know, organized activities or just, you know, for practice. So it's a large area. Cost obviously would be a factor in developing that, but it is something Edison, we're doing right now with Anaheim. So Edison is very open to that as long as we follow their restrictions. So it's a great possibility. Number 9 is all the way back over here. Again, another water district property site. It's close to, we'll back up a little bit here. It's pretty close to Live Oak Park. It's right over here. This gives you a reference. Right below Live Oak Avenue. Again, about a half an acre, about a little third of an acre. Possibly, again, the water district property would be a good chance to do something there. The last site we have is the final water district site, which is over by the school. This is St. Luke's Elementary School. So if you're able to develop this as a park site, it could obviously, it may be joint use with the school property that you could possibly be able to use there with the joint use with the school. The last one we're going to go through what we call our parking conversions. And one of the things as part of your downtown facility plan that you guys are working on right now to consider, and this, again, these are pretty high cost items because you're taking out parking, you'd have to build additional parking to make up for the parking you're taking out, whether in a parking garage or underground parking. But I wanted to show some possibilities of what could happen. You have the school district property lot right here. If you were to maybe take this area, which is about a little less than half an acre, turn that into green space, and do a double-deck parking lot here, or underground parking. If you move down a little bit here, developing green space or open plaza space behind some of these stores, you really have a great opportunity with all the parking lots in general that you have along this. I don't see many cities that have this, haven't done this way already. So obviously you have to figure out ways to get parking, but developing a green space that goes along the backside of these stores and restaurants, which is where a lot of people enter anyways because it's parking, is that you'd have almost a green belt on the backside of your commercial sites along Las Tunas that you could develop. We've shown just a few. Obviously, you could do more. You could change the way we lay these out. We wanted to show that there is a possibility that needs to be looked at as the downtown specific plan is being developed, that this is a possibility that you could be looking into. At that, I'm going to go back. And now we're going to get into what we're looking at as strategies and tactics. I'm going to turn it back over to Neil for a little while I get some water. And to have him go through some of his initial ideas.
All right, so we're going to talk through a few broad strategies by 3 areas: program, operations, and marketing. And for each one of these strategies, once we've looked through that, we will have specific tactics to help meet those goals as well. So firstly, to update and expand existing program areas to fill the unmet needs of the community, as we've observed. Build a culture of innovation to keep up with the city's changing demographics and trends. Increase awareness and participation rates of programs and special event offerings among the residents. And ensure that future programs are aligned with market factors as well as community demographics. So in a nutshell, all the areas of deficiencies that we've mentioned in the programming piece, with programs not aligned with your aging demographics, with lack of awareness being a barrier to participation, with limited rate of innovation as well, to address all of those, these are the broad strategies. Specifically for updating the program areas, we've recommended creating a specific area focusing on fitness and wellness that targets all ages. So looking at all levels of programs that target multiple age groups. It also manifests them into potential facility spaces that could look at multi-gen, multi-use opportunities. really focusing on fitness and wellness. Also keeping with the racial and ethnic diversity, increasing the number of culture-based special events as well. And then the staff had classified all the programs in 3 broad categories based on community benefit versus individual benefit. And so to ensure that the staff continues utilizing that when they determine future programs that will be offered, whether in fitness or wellness, whether in special events, or any other areas as well. Building a culture of innovation, we're recommending staff internally have an innovation audit annually to ensure the programs that are stagnating or slowing down need to be repositioned. Rebalancing those as well to increase the number of programs in the introduction stage from 5% to at least 10%. And then where possible, really using data to make decisions, whether it's Google Analytics to identify the website usage patterns, what is it that people are searching for when they get to our site, what keywords, where do they go, how long do they stay, what search engine drives them, all the rest, as well as general participation trends using sources such as Sporting Goods Manufacturers Association, Outdoor Recreation Participation Reports, etc. So you're really able to make a more educated decision as well, looking at participation trends, looking at data for the future. Increasing awareness. One big piece in building a brand is really ensuring consistency in the entire experience. And that goes for everything from the look and feel of the marketing collateral to the way the information is provided on the website, as well as program delivery itself. Also having a program participation awareness survey over time to look at variance in the number of individuals who did participate due to lack of awareness. Right now, 1 in 4 people said they didn't because they didn't know what was being offered. That needs to be alleviated. And back to market factors and demographics, looking at other providers. So we're truly meeting gaps in the community and not duplicating efforts itself. And also tracking the age segments to ensure that there is greater consistency between the programs and the ages they target, as well as the demographics of Temple City itself. We looked at operations and marketing strategies. The first one was, as a strategy, to leverage the greater use of technology in enhancing the outreach, as well as the overall customer experience. Continue focusing on volunteerism as well as partnerships, so you can minimize operating costs, as well as look at where you can possibly generate additional sources of revenue as well. Constantly look at gaining and tracking customer input to improve and enhance offerings. And lastly, and most importantly, differentiating the agency from all its competitors by offering truly outstanding customer service. And so as we look at this, the first one would be to have a smartphone customized website, and if possible, build an app as well. Let's see. What it really at this point, projections state by 2015, more people will access a website through smartphones than through a laptop. If I'm looking for information on a program on my phone, and what I read is something that I have to keep doing this to stretch it out to barely read 5 words, you probably lost me. What Google has also done is it's modified the search algorithm. So if you don't have a mobile optimized site, you will drop down in the search results. If you're not found in Google, you might as well not exist. And so there's more reason for you to actually move to a mobile optimized site to ensure that the information in the vein of good customer service is actually useful to the audience as well. And then also an app. If you're looking at, based on my geocoding, is my location to say, where is the closest park to me or where is the closest program, I have to be able to do that through my phone as well. Additional multilingual marketing through foreign language social media especially would be extremely useful. Weibo, the Chinese version of Twitter, is extremely popular, something that we've already spoken to the staff to certainly get into. Renren, their version of Facebook, just as much as well. You'd see most of the younger kids probably have a Facebook account for friends in America and a Weibo or a Renren for people abroad. And so just getting to people where you can as well, or through Youku, which is the Chinese version of YouTube. If you can't find a Hollywood movie here, you'll probably find it on Youku. And also, as you saw in the top 5 priorities, Wi-Fi in the parks. Extremely important, again, to meet all of these needs as well. We're working on developing apps that let users report in real time customer service issues that they see in a park, whether it's something as basic as graffiti, whether it's something that's a larger safety concern as well, whether it's just poor experience as a whole. And so to be able to do all of these using technology as well. Enhancing volunteerism, there's a website we recommended looking at called volunteermatch.org that allows an agency to post all the volunteer opportunities and for people to pick and choose the ones they'd like to volunteer for based on their interest or availability. Extremely powerful, again, helps you reach to people through technology in ways you wouldn't. The greater the use of volunteers, the higher the advocacy, clearly the lower the operational cost as well. And if we could then, it's largely a thankless job at times too, so having a volunteer recognition program where beyond the once-a-year annual party, if there could be something where volunteers can actually have tangible benefits, you're probably more likely to get more people who want to volunteer as well. Increased partnerships with the school district for joint use, as well as for future capital development, as and when the opportunities present, would certainly be recommended. And not just the school district, but also neighboring agencies. More and more we're seeing public-public and public-private partnerships almost becoming the norm, and it's certainly something we highly recommend too. Lastly as well, crowdfunding. You heard of Kickstarter and or Zoo or among several other sites, and a lot of them have now been used by public agencies. An agency in close to Minnesota raised $780,000 for a universally accessible playground. I'm sure for an aquarium they could probably raise some money here as well through crowdfunding. But outside of that as well, even for small programs in Virginia, they raised $1,500 to continue offering an arts program. So there's opportunities that exist, certainly something we ought to be looking at. Customer input, we mentioned we did a lot of on-site surveys in multiple languages. We certainly would hope that that continues as a part of our daily or regular process and a culture, not just a one-off thing as well as looking at online surveys where possible, and then communicating the results out there, measuring that as well so people see the impact of the input that they have contributed. And lastly, and most importantly, as I said, outstanding customer service. You have an extremely diverse audience. People expect a certain level of quality and have expectations of you. And from our standpoint, we always like to say that the most important person is the customer, but the most important customer is your own staff. And so it's important to train the staff first, to be able to focus on providing an exceptional guest experience, as well as introducing diversity training for staff to be able to deal with people that they encounter on a daily basis that could really be from pretty much anywhere in the world and that live in Temple City. So those are some of the operation and marketing recommendations. I'll let Doug talk about facility amenities as well.
Thank you, Lee. Before I jump into that, like Kathy pointed out to me that I skipped a section of properties that we identified, so I'm going to go back over there and do that really quickly, and then we can get on to the recommendations for that. We did a property search. We had a local realtor do a property search back on November 18th, and
Yeah.
this is a small miss here. So you'll see we actually identified 6 single-family homes that were for sale between $700,000 to $1.5 million, and 8 multifamily complexes between $800,000 to $1.5 million. But all of those were in a location in the city, and we have them mapped, but I'm not going to go through them because they're kind of in the middle of neighborhoods, and they really aren't of a size that we really recommend for a park in the location they're in. But we did find 6 commercial sites. Those I'd like to go through with you right now. And these are ranked. These are going to come up in order of how much they're listing for. The first one, the one we're probably most excited about because of the cost, is over on Rosemead Boulevard, right next to the wash. As you'll see on there, the cost right now listed is $600,000, which is pretty cheap for commercial property. It's only about a half an acre, and because of the shape of the and the location is why it is probably not worth much for a commercial site. But from a park space standpoint, it's a great opportunity. It's right off the trail. There's an extra wide sidewalk area over here that could also be developed as well. And it is in a location where there really is not really much park space. So we look at that one as a possibility. I'm going to go through the other ones. These go up, you'll see in cost. Over on Rosemead Boulevard, a little further north, is a small, slender site, about a quarter of an acre, $1.2 million. So the costs are will start going up, and they'll get a little bit more prohibitive as far as using. But we want to just go ahead and show them to you anyway, so you know that they're there. The next one is over on, there's a few on Las Tunas, which could be looked at as part of the downtown specific plan. This one here is, 0.2 acres, $1.5 million. I think we determined that was the, what restaurant is that? Yeah. So that's a possible location as well. Again, over on Gidley. This is, I'll show you this Gidley one because obviously it would be a nice park because it's next to the trail. But another possibility, as Kathy and I were discussing this actually before the meeting, was that this may be a possible place where you could relocate the city yard because it's already an industrial area, and use the other site that you have for the city yard for the park space we talked about earlier. So that's a possibility as well. And the next, the fifth one is back up on Las Tunas, a small little site right across from the parking lot. Again, quarter of an acre. Really, obviously very costly. I think it's almost $2.2 million, so pretty expensive to buy for park space. But it is available, for sale. So we want to make sure you were aware of that one. And the last one here is, again, Las Tunas right down the street. And it's about 0.4 acres right at the corner of Las Tunas, and not the corner, but actually it is right here. So you've got this site here right in the middle. So that's a possible, again, it's a commercial site, it's the most expensive. I think it's over $2.7 million. So it's pretty expensive, but again, I want to make sure you're aware of those. And this is, again, the reason we use the Google Earth map, because these can be taken off. As you can see, you can actually just turn off that site completely. It doesn't even show up. So it's a very fluid map that you can use and add and take things off as properties become available that you hear about. We can train the staff to draw on the map. It's very simple. Usually pretty easy to do it. So I'm going to go through those with you so you're aware that we have those sites, because as we go through the recommendations, a couple of those are going to come up. So.
Can you show the one at the north end of Rosemead Boulevard as well?
The which one?
The one at the north end of Rosemead in the county?
Oh yeah, that's true. We have so many sites that they remember.
Rosemead and Memphis. There's a lot.
Yeah, this is one of the possible sites. It's in the county area. It's about a quarter of an acre, and it's obviously county unincorporated area. But the nice thing about this one, it's on Rosemead Boulevard. It's essentially at the entry to the city. I mean, obviously, technically the entry is right there. But the nice thing about this is it could be used for a nice city entry monument to go along with your Rosemead improvements that you're doing. It is county property, and it's not being utilized. So looking into the ownership of that, and there's a possibility to acquire that property and use it for Oak Park space as well as a city entry monument. So. I'm going to finish up here just talking about, well, Neil went over the programs and the operations and marketing. We're just going to touch, and these are obviously in the back of your report, you've probably already seen that. With facility amenity strategies, we've got three main strategies we're looking at this point. One, we want to meet the park acreage goals to reduce the deficit in Temple City, as Kathy talked about earlier in her presentation. We're at about a half an acre per thousand versus 10, so there's a lot of deficits to make up, and that's what we've shown you a lot of those sites that we can possibly do that. Other is to meet the need for walking and biking trails in Temple City. Again, as you look at those priority items that Neil showed you, walking, biking trails rose to the top, but just about everybody we talked to, even the ones we talked to in the parks, that came up quite a bit. And the last main strategy is to update the aging amenities and add new amenities in keeping with the community needs and emerging trends. So looking at the existing parks and seeing what you can add to those. I won't necessarily go through every one of these unless you want to talk about them, but But what we've gone through, we identified all the sites that I went through there on the Google Maps diagrams. We've gone to identify the process that you go through. Obviously, the first one there is purchase the commercial property at Rosemead, that little triangle piece we saw. Then the next step is develop plans and then complete development. One of the things we'll do with this, once you kind of agree that these are things we want to look at, is we'll put timetables on these. Obviously, you could purchase a property if you chose to within the next year, 6 months to a year. Developing plans may take a couple of years, and getting it actually built may take 3 to 5. So we'll put those into those type of a breakdown once we kind of get everybody on the same page as to these things we want to be looking at. And then we also talked about contacting the owners of the different properties that we've talked about, whether it's the water company, whether it's the school district, and develop joint use agreements, or whether it's just private property that can be utilized. And then also the big one was meeting with Southern California Edison and discussing the possibility of using that and what they would do with the nurseries that are there. Obviously, that has to be accounted for as well. But that discussion could start now. The long term of developing that may be 10 years from now. But you want to get that discussion going early part of the process. Checking on the status of the post office, is that a possibility? Is it really going to close, not going to close? What's the timetable on that? Discussing with the county that Rosemead property that we just showed you there on the corner. And then, again, the city maintenance yard, determining if there is alternate locations that you could purchase to do that and get that process started. That may be, again, a long-term goal. It may take 5 to 8 years to get that done and constructed, but you want to be thinking about it now, especially as you're doing your general plan and updating that. And then developing the parking lot conversions as you're doing the downtown specific plan, looking at possibilities of how that could happen, and those are pretty costly, but they are really something that should be looked at in a more of a long-term goal range. And again, the sheriff station property may be pretty far out there, but be thinking about that as other plans for other amenities in the city come up. That may be a chance to be able to acquire that property as well. Meet the need for walking and biking trails. That's a pretty easy. I think Captain's already had some initial discussions with the county on if that's a possibility, and they're very open to that. So that's obviously a high need on the needs list. It's something that's relatively easy and inexpensive to develop compared to buying, a bunch of acreage and putting it apart. And you could usually meet a high need by doing that and doing that fairly quickly. And then updating the aging amenities and adding things that were in the needs assessment. They talked about the Wi-Fi in the parks, developing an RFP to have someone come in and look at what that takes to do that. Changing the park rules to allow on-leash dog walking, which came up at every meeting we talked about. Not necessarily a dog park, just the ability to walk your dog in the park. Something you could, that's a relatively low cost that would meet a lot of people's needs, in 6 months they'd be very happy with. So, develop plans to do new shade shelters here at this park, as well as maybe some new playground equipment here at Temple City Park. Kat and I even talked about maybe we may need to do relook at the master plan for both these facilities to see, what types of amenities you could put in to kind of not make it a piecemeal idea, but definitely something you want to be looking at. And with that, we're just going to turn it over to you with questions and discussion. We gave you a lot of information, so I hope you weren't too overwhelmed, but there's about 9 months of work in there, so we'd like to hear anything you have to say or ask.
Okay, is there anyone in the public who has a question? Okay, Mr. Wardlaw, you have to come up and you have to fill out a form, please.
It's okay, we're a friendly group.
Yeah, come on up. And then after you ask your question, if you could please fill out a form so we'll have it for the record.
So I can ask a question before I do that?
Sure.
Well, I have a question because I think that all of these suggestions are very interesting and I think they all have merit. And I was not here before at a lot of these meetings, so I may be left out on this, but I'm wondering where, since redevelopment funds are dried up, where the money for this would be coming, or is this just sort of a general plan that we're thinking about, or is there a specific source for financing these plans that we have? And that's basically my question.
Do you want to ask all the questions and then have the consultant respond,
Okay.
or do you want to do each one individually?
Yes, why don't we see if there are any other questions, and then we can have responses to all of them.
And by the way, I'm hoping that that money is available, because I like this plan so far.
Jerry, would you have a question?
I was wondering if I could get a better perspective from Doug as to the first piece of property on Las Tunas there, $600,000. I'm trying to get a perspective of where it was at. Is it on the north side of the street, right next to the wash?
It's on the south side of the wash.
On the south side?
It's on Rosemead Boulevard.
Sun Road, on Road Street.
Ah, okay. And I guess my next question is, has there been any thought of using the Kmart property? I'm thinking of underutilized parking or not even used at all between, let's say, Burger King and the Hat on the Rosemead side, of using that possibly as some sort of park area. Just seems like nobody ever parks there, and I'm just wondering if that would be a possibility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to ask a question or have a comment?
Good evening, Commissioners. And that was a very good report you had. They're very complete. Definitely shows 9 months worth of work. And one property I didn't see mentioned was the famous mortuary property. So that's just my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, I will open it up then for our commissioners.
Do you want to,
Do you want-
let's get Doug's
Oh, okay,
response
do
to
you want to
this.
do the answers first? Okay.
As far as the money, yeah, that redevelopment, unfortunately, we've lost that source of funding for stuff just like this, and too bad it's not here. One of the things that we're seeing most of the money come from the parks and trails we design now is from grants. Trails especially, there's a relative lot amount of grant money out there for trails. So that's something that why we look at the trail opportunities as something that's really viable. The other ways are assessment taxes, which, have to be voted on by the public. You don't really have any park development fees, because there's not, maybe a little bit of that, but, so those would be the primary things right now that you've got at your, and then any bonds. I know that the state is looking at putting another park development bond out. Probably wouldn't be on the ballot for a couple of years, but if you get these things planned, usually what you want to do, as you probably all know, is if you're going to get any of that money, either grants or bond money, you really have to have these projects planned and ready to go when that money is available. A lot of what's happened in the past years is that bond money's come out, they've granted money to the cities, and it's taken them 8 to 9 years to build the facility. So they're a lot more specific on, we want to see a plan in place before we give you the money. So these ideas, as you had mentioned, yes, it is just a plan. Well, you want to plan, it may take you 2 to 3 years to get a plan together, and at the same time, you can be applying for grants and looking for bond money, so you have to kind of do them conjunctly. You can't wait until the money's coming out to start planning for those. As far as the Kmart parking lot, that came up in one of our discussions. I don't know we really ever looked at it in super detail, but it's something we can definitely include or look at the possibility of doing that. Then the mortuary property, that is something we have not seen or I haven't even heard about, so I'm glad you mentioned that. And we'll talk to the staff about where that is and get that on the draft.
That's the northeast corner of Jump City Boulevard and Work.
Okay.
I think it's already been
Yeah,
purchased.
we can address that.
Okay, that's fine. So,
If it's the property that I'm thinking of, I believe the city already owns that. And it was purchased recently, and I believe the plans are to demolish the structures and turn that into additional parking.
We'll definitely get that included in the report with the status of where it's at. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we'll open it up to questions from commissioners.
Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions.
Okay, go right ahead.
Or are you asking for Parks and Rec
No,
first?
I'm asking for anybody.
It's an open call
Yeah.
for questions? Okay, I have a couple, and thank you for letting me ask them. First, to Mr. Bott and Mr. Grove, you put together a really nice presentation and done some really nice analysis in conjunction with staff, I'm sure. My question is, I like the real estate availability assessment that you did, but I remember back in urban planning grad school reading about pocket parks, and I thought they were so neat because they sort of address some of these issues where there's like an acute shortage in a given neighborhood, and I know we basically have some maybe park deserts or something, for lack of a better term. And so if I lived in that area, I would settle for a pocket park, something pretty small in the way of footprint, maybe only 1 or 2 parking spaces that can get there, but you can walk there maybe, and so you have something. And so I didn't see that component in your analysis as yet, but I was wondering, when you did your real estate survey, if you saw things like, instead of commercial-sized properties, smaller, like a house that's not in great shape, and that the city could purchase for basically whatever the going rate is, maybe $500,000 or something, and then could raise the structure and build a little pocket park there. So that's something that would be interesting, and then you could maybe get 4 or 5 of those. The money will go quite far, and you could kind of target some of those desert areas. My other thought was, and that was a question, so if you could speak to it. I didn't want to just not right this second.
Well, you're done.
Yeah, I do want to hear what your thoughts on that one.
Yeah.
And then timeline to implement. What's the lowest hanging fruit, and is there a timeline and maybe a prospective funding plan, to address it, if only to say we guesstimate it would cost this much to do this solution, not necessarily identifying funding per se. And then I was wondering about SCE and converting that whole strip, if public-private partnerships, if you got down to that level of analysis, who are the most appropriate or most readily available P3s, because those seem to be all the rage now, given the shortage of funding for a lot of public projects, government-funded projects. So maybe, I don't know if you've looked at like soccer clubs who would be, I think, gleeful to have access to a soccer pitch or two, and maybe donate their labor, and in fact, be identified. Although I went to Oxford, so I appreciate cricket going horrible at it. And then grant sources, funding strategy. I think you touched on that a bit, but I know there's a California Parks Endowment or something like that. I wonder how that works and how we might tap into them. A couple of my planner friends work there, but I just wondered about that. And then rooftop green spaces. The urban planner, wannabe architect in me wonders if maybe like the roof of City Hall could be accessed through some stairs and an ADA accessible little elevator or something, and then put some lawn on top of it. When I was at UCLA, I remember I worked for the Institute of Transportation Studies, and we did this analysis of let's build a parking structure and take out a soccer field. And they thought that was a good idea, and we thought it was an awful idea because it would just induce demand for parking and create more car trips. So the compromise was that they put parking below, but they made the roof a great big green space, and it worked out pretty nicely. So that was something I had a thought on. And Madam Chair, thank you for indulging me.
Thank you.
Questions.
Great ideas. Is there anything you wanted to respond to now?
I can do it. Do we do it per commission?
Yeah, why don't you, before we forget?
Too far down the road there? Okay, yeah. As far as the pocket parks, we actually, in the report, I'm sorry those pages aren't numbered, they were supposed to be, but they will be in the final report. We did a study. We had 9 or 6 residential properties and 6 multifamily that we did the criteria was 9,000 square feet or more, which is about 1/4 of an acre, which is pretty much as small as you really want to go with a pocket park. What we were hoping to find with some of those was a location that wasn't right in the middle of a neighborhood where people, because what you're going to run into that issue on that, if you put it in the middle of a neighborhood where people aren't driving already, is you're going to draw people there, and the residents that live there won't be very happy with that. I wouldn't even put parking there, you're still going to get that because of the deficit of the parks in the city. So we kind of excluded those. They're in the Google Maps. I can show them to you. And they range anywhere from $500,000 up to 1.5. The multifamily, the same thing. The locations of those weren't like on a corner where they would be accessible. They were kind of in the middle of these neighborhoods that we just didn't feel were good choices for parks. So that was the reason we didn't go over them tonight. But we do have them in there if you want to talk about them. Low-hanging fruit, as we talked about a little bit earlier, I think the two biggest things, one of the things is the Wi-Fi, the parks, the dog leash element. Those seem like small things, but they were a big demand. I mean, they were a big need in all the meetings we had and in the survey. So those are pretty easy to do. And I think that the biggest thing you can do is really pursue the trail issue, because that opens up a lot of opportunities. It's a relatively, the trails are usually between $500,000 to $800,000 a mile. So what we'll do is we get these, we find these recommendations, we will put costs to all of these proposed improvements, so you'll have those in the final report. But that would be a low-hanging fruit that I would really pursue at this point in time. Public-private partnerships, we hadn't discussed that, although as we look at some of the sites that are being recommended, any of the local groups, the soccer groups or the sports groups, or just any of the any other group, with the Tai Chi groups that wanted to be able to help, be kicking some money to help develop some of these things. We were hearing a lot of times that they wanted to have just open concrete areas to do their dancing with shade. So that would be a possibility. Yes, I definitely recommend that. Why don't you go ahead,
I think kind of like the model we're seeing on the partnership side, the P3s as you rightly call them, it's one end, it's the operational end, which is, as he mentioned, people willing to provide labor and time in exchange for either time to play on something or use it, or just access to some offerings as well on a shared basis. The other is in terms of actual swaps. So in the Bay Area, 2 neighboring agencies are actually tracking. There's a trail that goes through one city, passes through the other, comes back into the original city. So as opposed to both cities maintaining parts of the trail, they're saying we're going to maintain the entire trail. We'll track the number of hours we're maintaining that for. You have a park that borders, that's owned by us but borders your city. You maintain that park to us. At the end of the year, you track the hours of time you spend maintaining the park versus we maintaining the trail. We'll swap it, whatever's the balance, we'll pay you for it, you pay us otherwise, and we're good to go. So again, public as well in terms of offsetting cost. And there are corporates in many places where if you have a public park, even a pocket park, or small businesses where you might say I have 20, 30, 50 employees that could walk up to this park and I know they use them, they're willing to actually help subsidize the cost of maintaining them or providing additional dollars to put their name on it as a sponsor to say I'm a community partner, or because I know there's a direct benefit for my employees to be using public facilities, I'm willing to pay for that as well. So a number of opportunities both in terms of actual corporate sponsorships as well as offsetting cost on the maintenance side versus true public or the smaller private volunteer groups to say we're just true citizens and we'll do this as well. A slightly out-of-the-box idea that we're starting to see a little more now is the concept of voluntourism, where companies will actually, instead of having the biannual or the annual Las Vegas conference, will actually end up going into communities where they'll have a meeting or a conference or what they have for 2 days, spend the 3rd day actually helping in the community with capital projects. So you're technically, it's tourism, but with a volunteer angle to it. It's great corporate social responsibility, makes for great PR and a great story as well. And more people are wanting to give back, and this is a great angle, especially for the healthcare-aligned agencies, the insurance companies that you may have as well. And in your case, again, people looking to even have an access to a diverse ethnic community, certainly viable opportunities. So that's a long answer. I don't know if there's a single thing, but there's a number of different types of partnership opportunities that are out there.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay, other questions from commissioners?
And rooftop green spaces?
Yeah, I'll go over that.
No.
I didn't want to cut off. As far as the rooftop green, we've done several of those buildings as new. The issue you run into with existing buildings is the structural integrity of the building. So a building like City Hall would be would be tough to do that because of the weight. The site you're actually talking about, UCLA, they're just getting ready to redo the turf on that. There was an RFP out for it a couple of weeks ago, so that didn't work very well. So for any new facilities, and we talked about the parking conversions downtown, that's something where you could definitely utilize something like that. As you either put parking underground and put park space over the top, or if you build a parking garage and put park space on top of the thing. Those are possibilities that you could do. So yeah, that would definitely be something you consider for new facilities. It's very tough to do with old ones unless they're going to do a major renovation. And then you could look at doing that. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions from commissioners?
Okay. First of all, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation, and thank you, Director Burrows, for the fine job you've done with Parks and Recreation. Just a couple of comments on what you said this evening. The first one is Commissioner Horton here has already talked about the low-hanging fruit. That's one of the things I like to get my hands on too. But I really like the idea of going after the shared service agreement or shared use agreement with school districts and nonprofit organizations, churches. To me, that's a slam dunk. That's something that is so easy. It's kind of like, why haven't we done this before? And I did a little research before I came to the meeting, and I trying to find other cities that have done this, and it just, they're all over the place. So it's not, doesn't appear to be something that is groundbreaking. It appears to be something that is pretty much a way of life now. And if we can do that for low cost, I think that's a win-win. The other one, the trails approach, I really like that too. I think that's probably a little more work as far I've seen that Eat and Wash, and it, sorry county, but it does need some work. But I think it could be brought up to a serviceable level. And I like that one too. A couple of other things that you mentioned, the sheriff's department, possibility of moving that to our deputy in the back. I don't think that's going anywhere. And I know it's Temple City contracts with the Sheriff's Department for service, but that's a regional center also, and it serves the entire, well, not the entire, but a good portion of the San Gabriel Valley. So as much as, some people might like to have that in the city center complex, I'm not sure that it's going there, but I could be wrong. But anyway, there's quite a bit at stake there. Some of the things that we've talked about as planning commissioners over the last year or so is parking, and that's a big one. We actually had some studies done as well. Parking is a problem in Temple City, especially along the business corridors and those residential areas that are very close to the business corridors. We're trying to accommodate our citizens and do what we can to facilitate parking, and this is an ongoing issue. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think a joint commission is exactly where we need to go with this. So, we can discuss it with our fellow commissioners in the Parks and Recreation area. This is a good one. What else can I comment on? You mentioned partnerships. And I was thinking this as you were going through this. I know my wife is a elementary school teacher in Alhambra, and I do listen occasionally what she's saying. Contrary to popular belief, one of the things she mentioned is special education, and I know Temple City has a program with other schools in the area, and I believe we do the hearing impaired students and provide special education. And other school districts have programs for the sighted. It appears to be the way to go. When you don't have enough money to do it on your own, maybe it's time to get together with other school districts or other cities or other communities, parks and recreation areas. And I know Temple City citizens do use those parks in the outlying areas. We talked about aquatic center. I think Monty has just opened a new facility, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know. This isn't my area, so I really don't know. I shouldn't talk about it, but I will. It doesn't stop me. But anyway, food for thought. Questions? I can't think of anything else, other than, I really like the idea of the simple approach to some of these, especially the, shared services and the trails approach. Those are my comments.
Is there any other commissioners with questions or comments?
I have a couple.
Okay, go ahead.
First, I'd like to thank you gentlemen again. This is the second time I've heard this presentation, and it just keeps getting better and better. For all the years that I've been doing this, I'm, first of all, very happy that with this plan, there are some things we can immediately implement, such as the Wi-Fi, the rules for the dogs. The Wi-Fi is something I don't think any of us thought about. When we think about open space, we immediately think of our little leagues and our soccer leagues, and we don't have enough space. That's always been our number one thing, is we don't have enough space. Never did I dream that we didn't have Wi-Fi, which was our number one, and also that we needed places for people to walk their dogs. That just really wasn't a priority. We were thinking of pocket parks. We were thinking of parts of ball fields. So I want to thank you for your time with the surveys. I think they really show what the public wants, not just what the people we deal with, which is usually the sports groups. So I thought that was really great. And then also, it also gives us a plan for the future. Again, doing this, we can constantly talk about all the things we want, but we have no plan of getting them. We talked for years, probably, me, I know myself, 8 years, about how we need new parks. Every year we talk about it. We want a new park. The next year, we want a new park. But we know we can't go out and buy a new park. Where are we going to start? So, again, I wanted to thank you for that, because I do think we need a starting place. Even if it takes us 5 or 10 years, if we don't get started, we will never have any more open space. So, again, I'd like to thank you for that. And again, excellent presentation.
Thank you. Other commissioners?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Ward?
I guess two questions. One being, are you aware of a low-use turf that is out there for a lot of the screen space that's proposed or being planned for? And number two, in regards to the bike trail and the hiking trail, in regards to the other city, I think it was in El Monte, you stated maybe the Rio Hondo Trail. Was there any complaint from residents that abut those trails?
As far as the low-use turf, if you're going to go with natural turf, you would have, what we use at Live Oak is probably the one we've seen survive the best. It's a Bermuda grass that you've seen how that's held up pretty well. I mean, it does get worn out, but it does come back. The other option, obviously, is to go with synthetic turf for things like that. And there's varying levels of that. If you're going with a sports turf for a football field or soccer field, there's that level. There is also more of a lower grade level if you're just going to have an open park space. The only downside to that in the park space is that it does get very hot in the summertime. It is plastic, so we haven't really seen that go into a park that is not a sports park. We've seen it go into landscape medians. We've seen it go into, or parkways where no one's really going to be standing on it. That's the downside in having anywhere where there's going to be a heat. So yeah, we can. That's something that wants to do, and we've got a lot of data on it and do a lot of that kind of work as well. So as far as what was the other one? I was writing my
Properties that abut the.
The trails. Okay, yeah. The trails usually aren't a big issue because people aren't congregating and staying in one location, basically going by. We're doing one in Redlands right now that goes behind a lot of residential properties, and really no one had any issue with that. In fact, some people actually felt comfortable that there was actually a trail now, so people wouldn't be congregating and hanging out in the areas where there was no development. So, but like any public space, you're always going to have the NIMBYs that come out and don't want anything there. But with the Eat and Wash, you know, you just have to deal with those as you go. I don't foresee any really dramatic problems with that, but you're always going to have to deal with that at some level.
Thank you.
Can I
Yes.
respond real quickly to that
Sure.
as well? And Commissioner Leary, we did have, when we met with Supervisor Antonovich last week, I did have a lengthy discussion with their Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation in regards to the trails, and they are putting some in county areas as well, and so this is actually a welcome discussion with them because it would include further areas along the Eat and Wash. They did say exactly what you're talking about, that there have been some concerns from residents. If they're used to having nothing behind them except a wash where no one is, then all of a sudden you open it up to people coming back there, that there could be some concerns. And so the way that they address those, obviously, is you have community meetings. Their philosophy, or the way they're going about it, is they're not lighting them, so they're not used at night. So there are gates that are locking those trails when it gets dark, which minimizes some of the concern from the residents. But, and I think Commissioner Fish heard something similar when some of the pocket parks went in some of the areas that where there isn't anything right now, that always is a concern. And I imagine it would be in Temple City as well, if you were to put a park in a residential area where there is not one. We know anytime we look at doing improvements, even at Live Oak Park, changing the lights, or when we were talking about putting lights at Oak Avenue, there's always going to be some community concern. And I think our challenge then, and our duty, is to express to the community how it is possible and in fact could even be beneficial to them. But there is a lot of discussion that has to happen if and when we get to that point.
Thank you. Okay, other questions or comments from Commissioners?
Madam Chair, I do have a couple. It's kind of follow-up from earlier question about funding of the projects. We talk about, you know, where the money can come from, and then we talk about a certain project needs to be shovel-ready, ready to go, so that, you know, by the time it comes. Then I thought about those property that's that was an opportunity that's identified in the presentation as some property that are close to trails that would be ideal for development. But property that come on the market come and go, and we don't have money ready to jump in and purchase to take that opportunity. Are we going to go into the situation that Commissioner Fish talked about earlier, that we've been wanting it every year for 8 years or so, and are we going to keep on, you know, doing that? I mean, if we do not have money available to fund it, we're going to talk about it, want it, oh, it's there, it's gone. And we'll be going into that cycle of wanting it and not being able to get it. The second thing that I kind of experience is those wash, because they are very low volume and dry season. They do stink from time to time. It's that ideal for people to be walking around, and I guess biking might be good because you're kind of gone. You go 20 miles per hour, like Director Physical will do. But walking is that. Yeah, so those are the two things.
As far as the availability of money for the properties, as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons we did the math the way we did it, in the past we've done those in AutoCAD, and it's just a static plan, it can never be changed, other than you hire someone to do it again. But we do know that the properties that are available, they were available in September, may not be available in January of next year or in a year and a half when you have the money. But the reason for even looking at those sites, and Commissioner Cordes, you mentioned this sheriff station, yeah, that's way out there. But if in 6 months all of a sudden something comes up, hey, we're looking at doing a new civic center, we want to make sure that in this plan we've identified that as a possibility so it doesn't get missed. We did identify one site down by the wash that we were all excited about until we met with the city manager and Kathy and Mr. Howard. Well, they're going to put 88 homes in there. Well, had that been identified in the master plan as a potential park space, maybe a different decision would have been made. Maybe it still would have been homes, I'm not saying it wouldn't have been, but that's what we're trying to, with this plan, to kind of help out. So that if you can't buy the property on Rosemead right now because there's no money and it's not available in February, well, it comes off the list. But other properties may come up, and you can do a property search with a realtor pretty cheaply and add stuff to that map. The idea being that you've identified now that the trail is a viable option. Any properties that come available along that trail should be looked at by the city as a possible purchase if the money is available. So that's kind of the way this is set up, that it can be added to and subtracted from, every 6 months as much as you want, so that you're not missing opportunities that come up in the future.
So to follow up that, just along that logic, property comes up and then it might be gone in 6 months, it might not be. But should part of the recommendation be having some kind of reserve fund to be able to execute the purchase when something desirable is available?
Yeah, that could be a recommendation for sure, to have that, have a set-aside fund that would be for use for those purposes, definitely. And then you mentioned about the wash and, the maintenance of that and how it smells during certain times of the year. That would, be an issue as you work with a consultant on designing that, and they're working with flood control. Obviously, there'll maybe need to be other maintenance things that are done during the year when that happens to keep it clean, keep the water flowing. Right now, they don't care because no one's back there, so it's a big deal. But that definitely needs to be part of the plan.
Other commissioners have any questions or comments? See if we have any of the people who haven't asked questions yet.
I was just going to, regarding the, since Temple City did not receive the urban greening grant, the $180,000 that was applied for in 2011, based on this, the new work that you've done here, which is very detailed and so forth, would that put us into a position, you would think, where we might be able to immediately apply for another grant or for a similar type of urban greening grant at this point in time, or do we have to have actual production? You were indicating, obviously, that one of the best sources for funding is from grant. It's a matter of what your opinion is. I don't know how other cities have done regarding getting that money. And I was just going to say also that I think a lot of the ideas here are excellent, but also I think of San Gabriel Valley as being a combination of the cities, and there's so many different things. And clearly in my life, I've lived here all my life, and I've gone to a lot of the different cities around here, and I just consider everything to be kind of the same continuation. I mean, for instance, Alhambra has 3 pools that I know of, and there's a lot of different facilities around and so forth. So that's just my own thought process. And not that I'm very much am interested in Temple City expanding into a lot of these different plans, but just a matter of funding.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Haddad?
Thank you very much. This presentation was very impressive. I just have 3 small questions. One of them is, would pocket parks have playground equipment, and would they be pet friendly? I know that they're a smaller space, so would we be able to accommodate those? I'm trying to just look back at our facility amenity priority rankings and just trying to bring them all together in terms of what is actually feasible. So if we can put them all together, that would be great. My second question is there anything that we need to do to improve Live Oak Park? Perhaps eliminating some of the tennis courts. I know that we have 7, just an idea. And then my third question is, if we provide Wi-Fi in the parks, does that require us to need more benches or park shelters or anything of that nature?
I'll give you 3 short answers. For the pocket park piece, combining them, yes, I think absolutely. As we typically said again, for any of these, it's programs or specific needs drive overall design. So you most certainly can combine whether it's pet-friendly amenities, whether it's a playground equipment or anything else. To the next part as well, with Live Oak Park as well, it goes back to what Kathy mentioned, as a whole, we need to master plan both those parks again. So it's not just looking at should tennis stay or should tennis go, it's if tennis goes, what comes in. Also, do you replace the playground amenities, do you have pet-friendly spaces, what else can possibly go there, and if you had Wi-Fi, does that, typically as you look at project for public spaces, they talk about length of stay, determining the kind of amenities you have. So if you have Wi-Fi, you have a good likelihood of perhaps increasing length of stay in the park, which means not just shade structures, etc. You might also want to think of concessions as revenue streams. You look at, prior to this, when I worked for Disney, the intent was that per cap, the greater the length of stay, higher the per cap spending. If I'm there for 2 hours, I'm buying a drink. If I'm there for 4, it's a drink and a meal. If I'm for 6, it's a drink, a meal, and a souvenir. Which is why every time you leave a Disney park, you have one of these things that the young lady here is wearing right before you exit the park. Because that's when you have all the impulse buying. So the point being, there might be a number of opportunities depending on what you put in there, but it goes back to having updated master plans of both of those, so you can reflect a number of these findings and recommendations within that. That was your question?
Yes, just one more follow-up. So do we have any recommendations for improving Lido Park, or?
We put in there with respect to both shelters as well as playground equipment as individual tactics, as a part of the overall strategy of enhancing and updating amenities. But the broader piece would still be, if you're looking at meeting the needs and going back to what Commissioner Curran mentioned with sort of the regional approach, it's also what else is being offered by somebody other than us at this point, so we don't duplicate what's already out there.
Thank you.
Anyone else who hasn't asked any questions yet? Okay.
Yeah, just to redirect here, Commissioner Fish has triggered about 3 or 4 responses from commissioners here with a comment of 8 years in the process. And I just want to go back to that and say, first of all, I'm a little new to government service. My background's been in business. So we always had an expression, you can't manage what you can't measure. And my recommendation as you're preparing this is put goals in it. And one of those goals may be double the acreage or the size of the park within the next 3 years. You know, sometimes you're not going to meet those, make them realistic, but set it up there, set it up as a goal. The other one is we're talking about these issues without the financial context. And it's a little difficult because, you know, all of a sudden it's like going into the candy store. Yeah, if you take your kids in, you know, they're going to want everything. But, you know, if they got an allowance, you know how much things cost. So the financial part of it is important. Goals are important. The one thing that I left out in talking about this earlier is how the need for park space aligns with density within the city. Looking at your maps, what I didn't see up there was a map that we use quite frequently identifying the density within Temple City, and primarily along Sultana, Rosemead, some of those areas where you have multiple dwellings or high density is what I'm getting at. So as you're going through this, you know, something to consider. And that's the end of the story.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair, I just had 2 follow-up thoughts that came along from the stimulating discussion here. One is economies of scale, and I wondered if you park experts could speak to this. Basically, my thought was that, you know, well-subsidized programs drive costs down, and you kind of spread the benefit over the broadest possible access. So a lot more people could use it. And to wit, have you ever seen like a co-op maybe built among cities, such that you take a survey of what each, you know, of 2 or 3 cities who join this co-op can pool their resources, both physical assets and you know, and I guess, you know, funding or programs already in place. Who does what best, and then how do you bolster the subscription to those in sort of a like Commissioner Kern was saying, I look at this as one sort of regional home, not just you know, stopping at the borders of my city. So, you know, is there a way for that kind of co-op, joint effort, assessment of what's out there in the way of programs and facilities, and then a shared use approach to it? And then a sort of collateral to that thought was, again, going back to the real estate survey that you folks did. I know at Temple City Boulevard and Valley, just east of Temple City Boulevard, there's sort of this expansive, to call it a parcel, it's not doing it justice, because it's quite large, but it's kind of barren and derelict, and I don't think it's within Temple City limits, but it just looks so ripe for redevelopment, especially were it that, you know, El Monte and Temple City could kind of work together to put something so you have a joint park or a regional park. Maybe LA County wants to get in on the act. You got maybe 3 project sponsors that way, and then since it's a border park, everybody could, you know, use it. So, and curiously, they've got Temple City street signs marking it, which is why I thought it was in Temple City years ago, but it's just an incongruous fact there. But anyway, those are 2 thoughts maybe you could speak to.
Good point on the economies of scale. I think it works both ways. Part of the reason we don't recommend pocket parks is the lack of economies of scale from a maintenance standpoint sometimes. But given that you have such space limitations, we'll take whatever we can get. So that's part of the challenge. But programming as well, we've seen multiple models. We're working on one in Ohio where it's the Ohio University of Zanesville, the Zanesville campus, donated a building and put up $1 million. We had a foundation within Zanesville itself, a Muskingum Foundation, that actually fundraised for the rest of the capital dollars. And we had the YMCA that came up and said, I will cancel or eliminate all my therapeutic recreation and all my rehab-based recreation programming and transfer all my participants and user base to you. So you have a built-in user base from day one when you open, which guarantees X number of revenue dollars coming in. So there's, again, there's all sorts of innovative ways. Right now, necessity is the mother of invention. Every agency, whether it's a public agency or school district or anywhere else, is frankly struggling. And they're all serving, at the end of the day, the same people. So as far as I'm concerned, whether a model exists or not, nothing's stopping us from being creative and coming up with models too, if we think there's something that's viable, given the uniqueness of this area, where you're right, you might have geographic boundaries that politically say this is a different city. If I'm standing and looking across the street, I have no idea what city I'm in. They all seem the same culturally. And so I would certainly recommend more and more to look at both from a programmatic standpoint and from an offering standpoint for any and all partnership opportunities. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I just want to touch briefly on Commissioner Cordes' comment about goals and financial. That will be in there. What we plan to do now is just give you all of our recommendations, and then we will break those down into 0 to 2 years, 3 to 5, 7, and 7 to 20. So those with financial numbers and on with that. So you'll have, we need to do these things in the first 6 months and so forth. So it'll be lined up for you. As far as that, I'll look at that property and see who owns it. And yeah, that's a great opportunity to do some joint use. So we'll put that on the list.
I have a couple questions. I believe it was our last public meeting. It was brought up about the parklets, and I didn't hear anything mentioned about that tonight. Is that going to be included in the report? And then, go ahead, Doug.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll just stand here and wait you.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, you did mention that there is a lack of programs for age 45 and up, and that that does not correspond with the percentage of population that are that age. However, there's nothing, or I didn't really see anything, maybe alluding to a senior center or some kind of a facility to accommodate these types of programs. And I'd really like to see that maybe elaborated on a little bit more in the report. Several years ago, you know, there was lots of grants for senior centers, and maybe that might be coming up again in the future, and it would really help us if we wanted to pursue that, if it was mentioned in the report somewhere, so.
As far as the park list, yeah, that is still part of the plan. I'll just be honest, I didn't get to them tonight because we just had so much to show you. But for those who don't, park lists are kind of a new trend where they basically take anywhere downtown and they'll take the sidewalk and the parking spaces that would be there and convert them into maybe a small, 30-foot or 40-foot long by, as wide as the parking lot is, 9 or 10 feet. And usually it's for, it's like tables and chairs and the restaurants can actually put some tables up there. So that will be part of that. It kind of goes with the downtown specific plan, as far as what you're doing with Las Tunas Avenue, or Las Tunas Drive, but that is definitely will be part of the recommendation. So. And as far as the senior center, do you want to discuss that?
I think part of it was nationwide we're observing a trend moving away from age-specific segregated spaces to multi-generational spaces. Given the cultural background of the community you typically have 3 generations living under the same roof. We have a lot of grandparents who are during the day often having taken care of the grandkids while the parents are away. So you really want to have spaces that allow for the family to recreate together, than separating where you either can go yourself or you can just drive somebody to some other place, and that's pretty much it. So the teen center concept, the senior center concept, while they're still there, largely we're seeing a shift away from that to more of a multi-use, multi-generational space. So that's something I would recommend, where you can have dedicated spaces for different age segments within the facility, but as a whole, the space still ought to be a multi-gen community facility itself, which is partly why. If you're still, if you feel strongly about it, we're happy to recommend some dedicated spaces as a whole, but I would probably say as a viable opportunity, as well as economies of scale from a maintenance and development standpoint, a multi-gen community space might be a better option to look at.
I was looking at it more in terms of grant funding that may come up in the future for these types of things, and if it's mentioned specifically in the plan, that puts Temple City in a better position to get that money. But if it's not mentioned, then you kind of lose that opportunity, so.
Fair enough.
Okay, thank you. All right, last call for questions or comments. Okay.
So I think at this point, what I believe the consultants are wanting to get from the commissions is either consensus or recommendations or yeses or nos, in particular regards to the final pages, the strategies and tactics. If there's any in here that you strongly feel should not be pursued or proposed to the council, to let us know. If there's any such a thing, absolutely, this really needs to be one of the first things we do, to let us know that as well. If you're okay with the recommendations and the tactics that are listed there, then that's okay too. But I think we want to wrap it up with your final thoughts and recommendations on what Doug and Neely have provided to you in regards to, in particular at this point, in regards to the facilities, but also the programming as well. But focus mainly at this point on the facilities. And let's go from there to wrap it up. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I guess as a follow-up to that, really, it's more if you see something you just really think is out of line. I mean, obviously these are all driven by the needs analysis and the survey, but if you see something that you really think it just shouldn't even be part of the report, to highlight that. I mean, if you think everything else is okay, then I wouldn't necessarily go through and talk about all the things that are there, just things that you don't feel are important. Yeah, and that's good. You just make a good point. This is not the last time you'll see this. We're going to actually take what comes out tonight. By December 6th, there's going to be a final report with everything in it, and you'll get a copy of that as well. The council meeting is January 12th? 7th. So you'll have, between that time and January 7th to look through the whole report and see the goals and the action steps and everything like that.
So do you want a formal recommendation then, or? No, that'd be helpful?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What is the pleasure of the commissioners? No, we don't have a motion.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Oh, no. A motion. Nice try.
Are you basically asking us whether we want to eliminate one of these action items?
If you want to eliminate any, to let us know, otherwise to maybe just accept the recommendations as presented by the consultants.
Is there anything anyone wants to remove?
Well, Madam Chair, I was thinking, not remove per se, but if from this dialogue, there are some action items that a review of, the record reflects that there are some action items or things worth studying that haven't been heretofore considered, then maybe we can incorporate them and then, evaluate them for their merit. Other than that, I would propose to go forward as per plan with this.
Is that a motion?
I was just gonna say.
If it is, it's a really sloppy one. I invite a more trite, incisive one. Commissioner O'Leary,
Is that a motion? Yes.
like a motion
Thank you.
to evaluate the comments for any good action items that need to be followed up on, and to move forward with with the recommendations.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Parks and Recreation Commissioners Fish,
Yes.
Commissioner Lopez,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosso,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Haddad,
Yes.
Chairman Georgina.
Yes.
Planning Commission, Commissioners Curran,
Yes.
Commissioners Horton,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Leary,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Leon,
Yes.
Chairman Cordes.
Yes.
Motion carries, yay. All right, then now we will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
All right, if there's no objections, then the meeting is over, and thank you everyone for attending tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice to meet you.